So I'm Marc Weigert. I'm president of Method Studios worldwide, part of Deluxe, and also CEO of Uncharted Territory. First, what very few people know, Method has 9 locations worldwide. So our biggest location is in Los Angeles, which is split about 50% feature films and the rest commercials, finishing, method design, commercial production actually, not just post-production as well, and now also previsualization and virtual reality tools with Method Next. Then we have Method Vancouver, which is mostly feature films. We're also now starting to do a few commercials here and there. Then Method New York, London, Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta, Sydney and Melbourne. So a lot of different offices, a lot of different places. Some of those offices mainly specialize in commercials, and the other ones, as I mentioned, feature films. The largest pieces that we just finished up was San Andreas. Was shared between Method Vancouver and Los Angeles. So that's destroying Los Angeles, while actually destroying half of California with The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. Also, we did a lot of shots for mainly the end sequence of Avengers 2 that just came out. Last year we did Night at the Museum 3. Some beautiful sequences with animated lions, animated snakes. Last year also we finished up The Maze Runner, one of the big movies that we did, where we were the soul vendor. And a plethora of commercials. Done campaigns for General Electric, some beautiful ones were award-winning. Also Game of War, games series. There's a bunch of commercials, actually I think 5 different ones by now that we've done. And yeah, that's pretty much, it's very, very diverse. My time is literally split between about a million little tasks. Of course, for my background, I was always very, very involved in the, I would say, the very lowest level, so to say, of the production. So I'm always interested in what exactly are the artists doing, how are they working, how is the pipeline working, how are we working together between the studios, what tools are in place that allow us to educate, be more efficient, be faster, better, make more beautiful images, service our clients better. So for all of that, it means when I started the job about a year ago, I immediately decided to really dive into that level and first start by sitting with different artists, supervisors, producers and so on in all different areas, be it commercials or feature film visual effects in the different facilities. So I've visited most of our facilities. I've taken a look at how they are working and then look back at my own experience to see, okay, how can we where can I identify things that I think we could do better or faster, more efficient? And that's really what I've been working on for the past year. Well, I think what happened in the last 10 years with the visual effects, 10, even 15 years possibly with the visual effect industry is a little bit of a microcosm of what also happened, let's say, in US politics. So if you look at just the general population, I think what has happened in the last 10, 15 years is that the middle class has broken away. You have the super rich, and then you have the people that have 2 or 3 jobs in order to pay the rent. And I think the visual effects industry is very similar. Is you have a few very, very big companies, the MPCs, DNEG, ILM, Sony ImageWorks and so on, that have up to 2,000 people in their employ worldwide. And then, a lot of the middle classes, say the middle companies have actually really broken away, have gone bankrupt, had closed or whatever. And then you have still a plethora of smaller companies that are anywhere from 10 people to maybe 80, 90 people or something like that. So basically, you have to figure out, as a company, Method obviously is a worldwide operation. We have about 700 people, not all working on feature films. So that kind of puts us in the, I would say, upper middle class right now. So the question is, where do you go from there? And I think for us, my strategy always was that we have to prove that we become part of that top class, that we can we can manage a project of a certain size. I had to think back of my time as a visual effects supervisor on the production side. Because what we usually would do is you would get a huge project, let's say like 2012, for instance, was pretty much the biggest project that I've done, where you have whatever, $70 million visual effects budget, and you have a humongous amount of shots in a screenplay that seems unmanageable. So what you do first is you break it down by sequences. So you don't deal with suddenly 1,500 or 2,000 shots. Now you're dealing with maybe 25 different sequences, and of different sizes and of different difficulty levels. So now the first thing that you do is you figure out which ones. There are certain sequences you can only give to certain visual effects houses. You can't just give it to the 15 people. They might be as creative as they want to be, but if you need to destroy the city of Los Angeles or something like that in an earthquake, that means you need a huge amount of rendering, simming machines, enough people, effects artists specialized in that kind of stuff. So there's only whatever choice of 7 or 8 maybe facilities worldwide for that. So you would first actually look at those and figure out who the right facilities are for those chunks of the films. And I believe that's pretty much how everybody operates these days. I mean, the days where you go to a single facility are mostly over. Nobody really takes that risk anymore. It still happens from time to time, but most of the time it gets split up because everybody knows it's too much of a risk to give it to one single facility. But still, that means there are these big chunks, usually 2 to 3, maybe different facilities that work on a big movie. And my strategy for Method was always, I want to make sure that we are one of them, that we are the ones that you think of first when you first look at all your big sequences. That means we have to prove that we can do that. That also means that you have the capacity and the capability, both on a quality level, but also on a quantity level, actually, to handle a certain amount of stuff. Today, I think you can pretty much divide visual effects in 3 different things. You have your characters, character animation, you have your environments, and you have your effects. And if you work on a Marvel movie, you always get all 3. You have characters destroying an environment, right? Other movies might be just 2 out of those 3 or whatever, but you have to have those capabilities. And we've systematically been building our showreel and bidding on certain projects to actually make sure we can fulfill all those. We've built up fantastic character animation teams, both in Los Angeles and in Vancouver. Now with having done San Andreas, we have a really, really good effects team also in both of those 2 locations. And we've always been very, very good at environments, actually. So now I feel like, okay, we're there and we've done the bigger projects, so we're on the right road. And that is part of that strategy. That, of course, doesn't mean you can forget about all the smaller projects. You still need those. I can talk about afterwards if you want, because it's about how to create a baseline for your studio, because it's such a volatile business and every project is so different from the other that you also have to think about, how do you stagger the projects? What kind of talent do you need for certain projects? Interesting, because I think it gave me a different view of that and a different set of analytical thinking about the projects, I think. Because what happens is, obviously the main difference being that before that, pretty much the last 15 years, for instance, with Uncharted Territory, and I'm still involved in Uncharted Territory, obviously, the last 15 years we've done one project at a time, as you just mentioned. Sometimes as big as 2012, where we did a third of the shots, over 400 shots in-house, with an over 100 people unit that we built from scratch, basically. Or smaller projects like Anonymous, where we had up to a little bit over 30 people, for instance. But it's always one at a time. And the nice thing about it is obviously that from the beginning, you can plan ahead for the whole next, let's say, 16 months, because you know exactly where you end up. You know exactly what you're doing. That's not the case when you are a vendor facility, because you're constantly bidding on projects, and first you don't know whether you win this bid, whether it gets awarded or not. So you can't really always plan very far ahead. Sometimes you have projects in the pipeline for maybe up to a year. Sometimes you only know about the next few months, and then it evolves while you're working on that. But one of the the main problems or the challenges of a facility to tackle is always to find the right baseline of these artists. So what happens is obviously every project has the same trajectory. It's literally an exponential business model. You know, you start, let's say, even before the shoot, you start out with a few people doing asset building. You do the modeling, texturing, rigging, and so on, maybe some shading for the assets. So you might have, depending on the size of the project, you might have 10, 15 people or so there. That's how you start with. And then for months and months and months, until way into the shoot, you just have those 15 people, maybe become 16, whatever. Then you get turnover. Now, the turnovers from the shoot now give you another level. Now you start with 3D tracking, possibly rotoscoping, painting, whatever, some compositing already maybe. So now you ramp up to, let's say, 30 people or whatever. Then you stay with this per 30 people for a while. Maybe it becomes 35 or so. And then you get towards the end. And now suddenly, for the last 2 months or so, you go to 90 people. And that's pretty much this exponential trajectory is what every project has. There's no way around it, and every company deals with it. And that's one problem, of course, because you can't staff for those 90. You have to figure out now, what do we really staff for? What's our permanent staff, basically? Do we want those 10 on the bottom there that are always there, or those 30? Cannot be the 90 for sure. Then you have to think about, well, how many other projects are you working on? And there are two problems with that. Because one is, you know, it would be nice if the project would be just exactly staggered in a way where you say, oh, you know what, when I have my 30 here, you know, before I hit the exponential curve there on that project, the other project just starts ramping up, and then it hits the exponential curve, and then here, and that would be very nice. But usually what happens is all the summer movies come out pretty much at the same time. They have to all be finished in April, May, whatever, right? Some of the movies have to be finished in March because they come out in May. And so on. And so what you have now suddenly is you have these 90 people here, and then you have a second movie. So now suddenly you're at 180 people for that. And before that, you're only at 60. So you have to plan for that. And that is pretty much exactly the same as what we've done before on a single project. So as a facility, the main difference is that you have to have your baseline there, but you still have to plan for these spikes. And on a project-by-project basis, we just don't have a baseline. We start from absolute zero, but still go from there and plan for that spike. So the other problem of a facility is, though, because the spikes are now a lot higher, other problem is also the type of people that you need. Because every project needs a different skill set. So for instance, one day we might make a movie like San Andreas, for instance, which is 90% effects driven. Right? It's breaking buildings and dust simulations and huge effects. So you need a pretty big and solid effects team. Now the next movie might be a talking cat, where you don't need a single effects guy. So now I got this really great effects team here, but what I need is actually a really good character team. So there you have a problem. So as a facility, again, you kind of have to be prepared. You have to have both. I have to have my great character team, and I have to have my great effects team, and I have to find the work that supports both teams. Otherwise, I'm not competitive in the market, because then I can only do one or the other. And that's where it becomes really tough. And I think that's where I believe in the past some facilities failed, which is probably nothing that they could do about. Because if you just are in an unlucky situation where, let's say, you get bombarded at first with all these different effects projects, and you staff up for that, and you build teams, and you're suddenly there, and then suddenly those projects are over, and you get a totally different kind of project. You just get environmental extensions. You just get whatever, beautiful character animation. Well, now suddenly you have tons of people sitting around, and all these other people that you have to hire new, and that's suddenly where you incur costs that you cannot make up for anymore. And that's how facilities go bankrupt. So it is. I don't have a good solution. There is none, really. That is part of how difficult the business is and how volatile it is. But you really have to deal with it, and you have to try to strategically plan your bids and your projects that you go after. that you really want, and communicate that too. Because it's important that the studios know that. Look, we just have this great team here. Do you have a project that fits to this team? Then, please award us a chunk of this project, because, that kind of sustains that team. So that's a constant struggle for the executive producers, of course, that are dealing with this. And those spikes, by the way, also what I haven't even talked about, don't only affect your human resources, but of course your hardware resources as well. Because now suddenly you need 120 nuke licenses and you might only have 60. You suddenly need, I don't know what, 1,000 render machines, but your baseline is 500, so now you have to rent for 3 months very expensively. Maybe your engine room doesn't even support that amount of power, because now you don't only need the power for it, you also need the air conditioning for it as well. And you need the backup systems for that as well. Everything doubles up, right? Your server space doubles up because you're having 5 terabyte SIMs of a building crumbling. Your backup space doubles up. Your networking infrastructure needs to double up. And that all happens within a month or two because you're hitting a spike. So very, very difficult to deal with that, because you can't just invest. You can't just say, oh, well, we'll buy another 500 render machines for 1.5 million because we need it for 2 months. Today, if you look at the feature film world at least, not so much the commercial world, the feature film world is obviously 100% driven by tax incentives. There's really nothing else. I can't sugarcoat that. It's people go to Montreal because there's a 40% tax incentive. That's the only reason, really. And that, I think, is pretty much what drives everything. It comes from the studios obviously needing to save money. Everybody wants to make the movies cheaper, so they kind of pass that on to us and say, well, you have to be in a tax incentive location, which is understandable. I would probably do the same thing as if I was head of a studio. That drives the decisions. For commercial work, it's more, you're talking about Detroit, obviously still not what it used to be anymore, but still a car city of America. New York, obviously, a big commercial hub, and LA is as well. So that's really more a decision of where are the clients and how important, as you said, is it that you are there. Are the clients actually clients that are coming to visit you? Will they be in this location? Will they sit next to Flame Operator and want to do this? Like in the old days, which is happening. The directors, of course, want to come in and be part of the post-production. So in a commercial, it's more of a decision is where are these clients, and does it make sense to open something? Are there enough clients there to justify spending the millions of dollars that you spend to first outfit a facility? Because we wanted to look kind of nice too, and in the feature film world, it's really the tax incentives or the extreme cheap outsourcing locations. I mean, every studio has some outsourcing or insourcing, in this case, then location in India, China, Singapore. And those are those decisions are being made, obviously, based on the salary level of that location. Outsourcing is a long story, actually. It can work well, but you have to spend the time and the effort. I've tried it a few times, actually, with Uncharted, for instance, where we're a little bit more handicapped because we had time frames, right? I can't say, let me invest a year of slowly growing a facility in, let's make this up, Bangalore or something like that, and invest the time to educate people, to train everybody, and so on. We couldn't do that. We were on a budget on one single movie. So I've tried to work with a bunch of outsourcing partners, and what has happened in the past, and again, this is my personal experience, so I mean, people will probably flog me for this or say it, but still I'm going to say it because it was my experience, was that what happened was, obviously, you need, in, let's say, your main location, let's say Los Angeles for now, you need to have somebody who first packages up what you send to the outsourcing location. That means, zipping up all the EXR, DPX files. That means writing up and drawing into it and saying, well, here's what we want you to paint out or to roto or take care of this and so on. And then you send it there. And then you get it back after 2 days. And then that same person has to do quality control on that. So they go through it and then they find whatever. Okay, this has been misunderstood and so on. So they write up another note and send it and package it back up and send it back. And then 2 days later, you get another thing back, and then they look at it again. So I noticed that at some point in time, I needed to hire more and more and more people in Los Angeles to actually do exactly that, the quality control and the packaging of those files to send it over. That I thought, well, I might as well just do it here. Why just hire the people who send it somewhere else? So my personal experience is mixed. I know that there are obviously, as I mentioned before, all the other companies, and including Deluxe has a major facility. Obviously, Stereo D has a huge facility over in Pune. Actually, very beautiful operation and very well run. And that's been in operation for several years. And it takes time to build it up. So if you invest the time, the money to manage it correctly, to have quality control, on site, usually Western personnel that you send, people that you trust, that you know are very good at their job, that you send over there and keep them there for 6, 9, 12 months to actually train the local people and make sure there's a quality control level and understanding of the quality that we want and need here, then it works. But it's not something you can pull off in a few weeks. I think, in essence, it's the same thing. I mean, I'd say if you manage your teams well, they'll automatically produce great work. So how do you manage your teams well? What we always did, there's a few things, couple of secrets for me. One is with my other business partner, Volker, I made a pact about 10 years ago where we said, life's too short to work with assholes. And do we have to beep this? No. Very good. So it's a major rule because, and by assholes, obviously, I mean the egocentric, non-communicative type of artist that exists. So what you want is the people, if I had the choice between two people, and one is the super mega awesome, fantastic resume, has worked on everything out there, but it's a guy where I say he keeps everything to himself. He would never teach anybody anything. Would never go with that guy. I would always go with a guy who is maybe a little level lower, but who has enthusiasm, who is excited about the process, who wants to share, who wants to learn, who is just a community person. Because what you need to do is you need to build a community that shares. Every time somebody, be it a compositor who finds a new trick, you're always dealing with new cameras. You have new digital cameras with digital chips and underexposed green screens and whatever the hell. So there's always stuff that you've never done before. It happens in every movie. Suddenly, you really have to frickle and figure something out. And when this one compositor figures out a great trick, you want him to be the one who's proud of that and say, hey guys, I found this out, let me show you. And then everybody learns from this one guy. And that kind of community of artists that are sharing ideas, that are not afraid to come up with interesting ideas, right? We always, there needs to be hierarchy, obviously. We were always, I was the overall visual effects supervisor there. So in essence, I have to have the last word, but that doesn't mean that I don't give people the chance to come up with ideas. I was always happy and I always encouraged it to be able to say, guys, I can't think of everything. So if you have some great idea that fits, you're storytellers. So every single shot tells a story. If you find something that tells that story in a better way than what we originally planned, let me know. Talk about it. And if I think it's good, well, I'll talk to the director and say, hey, here's another idea. How about this? And I think once you create an atmosphere like that, where everybody feels like they can really contribute, and they share in a community, you automatically get fantastic work. There's no way that you cannot get fantastic work. So that's what I've always been trying to create. It's a mix of the teams, for instance. You want to have a few really excellent leaders in there, and you want to mix in also a few newcomers who maybe just came straight out of university, film school, whatever, or just are self-taught, that had a great little showreel that they did themselves and posted on YouTube, and we thought, oh, there's talent there. You want to mix that together, because these people will be so excitable about the process and will soak everything up that they'll give you so much more than you'd ever expect. And I think that's how would I try to mix the teams together.